Welcome to Speaking to Expand, the podcast for speakers. Are you an aspiring speaker or a seasoned professional or just a TEDx enthusiast? Well, whether you're stepping onto the stage for the very first time or a seasoned pro, this podcast is your backstage pass for success. I'm your host, Ryan Brady, two-time TEDx speaker and founder of Scaled Leverage, where we help business leaders and professional speakers amplify influence, revenue, credibility, and impact. And today, we will be diving into the minds of top-level speakers. You can expect impactful insights, surprising strategies, and creative techniques that will elevate your speaking game. So let's get into it. Hello, y'all. I'm here with Natalia, and I am not going to steal her thunder. I'm going to let her present herself, but obviously you know that if she's here, there's a reason she's here. Natalia, what are you doing here? Tell me about yourself.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me. Hello, everybody. I'm Natalia Levey. I am a restaurateur in Tampa Bay area.
Yeah, so I think that's a very humble way to present yourself. So what is your kind of journey? I know you said you were, when I initially pronounced your name, I pronounced it wrong. I said Natalie, and you said no, it's Natalia, and I heard kind of an accent. I said, where are you from? She said originally from what used to be the USSR, speaks fluent native Russian. So what was that journey? I know you're in Tampa now doing amazing business stuff, which I really want to dive into in a second because that's super interesting to me. But how did that journey look like from you choosing to go from the USSR to, being a successful business leader in America? What did that look like for you?
Well, not a simple journey, obviously, because being born during communism in the former USSR was interesting, I should say, especially being a teenager going through all the changes that were happening in the country, the complete breakdown of a regime. I remember having tickets for food and tanks in the city, and you go to bed and you don't know if you're going to wake up just because of the complexity of the whole regime. And then grew up with this sort of mindset of be quieter than water and lower than grass. So don't be different. Don't kind of stick your head out too far and too much. There was no such thing as entrepreneurship. So everything was sort of this government structures. So everybody was on this very equal plane. Yeah. And then so from that, the regime broke down. And by the time I was in my late teens, I just felt lost because personality wise and education wise, and it's just not like, how do you move forward where there's no clarity as to how to function, because the path that was ahead wasn't going to work for me, and because I felt that I just had a different approach to life, and there was something inside me that was encouraging me to move forward with change and face the change. So I left, and I lived in Asia for about a year and a half, and then found my way to the States, New York City in 1999, and went through the culinary school there, and got married, and then gave birth in New York in 2004. And then we moved on to Florida because it was a great place to raise a family, raise a child. And my husband's family was around here. So I wanted my daughter to have aunts and uncles and grandmother, and at least one of them.
Now, first of all, I think that's really, I've been fortunate enough that I've never had to deal with, communism on the level that you've had to deal with it. And I think you've definitely, based on the previous conversations we've had and what I've checked out your website and done a little research on your businesses and stuff, you've obviously maximized your ability to dive into entrepreneurship, build your own businesses and that kind of thing. And obviously you, from the end of culinary school to now, there's a lot in between there because you're a lot more than just a chef now. But what did that journey kind of look like for you? You learned how to be a chef. You left culinary school. You're doing a lot more business now than at that point, right? What did that journey kind of look like for you?
Yes, definitely. Well, right out of culinary school, that was a year program, and I had amazing internship opportunities. My first internship was with Chef Laurent Tourondel in New York City. He You may have heard he owns BLT and BLT Steak Bistro around Toronto. And I actually just reconnected with him probably 18 years since that internship in New York. And it was amazing we just had a 2-hour catch-up conversation, and he's opened many other restaurants. And then after that, so in the middle of my internship, the restaurant that he was running closed down. The owners closed down the restaurant. So I need to find another internship. And I ended up at a corporate law firm with 700 employees, and we did breakfast and lunch. I ended up working there for about 3 months. And then the whole culinary career came to a screeching halt because of the health issues that I was having. I was born with hip displacement, which eventually turned into scoliosis, and it was very, very challenging physically for me to be in the kitchen and work. So I had an opportunity to leave my husband as an entrepreneur, and I was able to focus on family and travel. And over time, I got into wellness on a big scale. And in the last decade, I spent a lot of time dedicated to researching different wellness modalities, which I was able to implement into the restaurants that we have now. We opened our first restaurant about 6 years ago. So 6 years later, 5 restaurants now. We're opening a big food hall in St. Petersburg, Florida this year, multi-concept. So it's been an interesting journey to sort of start off as a chef and then get into wellness and work with doctors and their patients on teaching them how to cook better for themselves and how to cook with intention and love and great cooking techniques for health. So basically food as medicine. And then to pivot back into the industry and focus on different restaurants. I'm not in the kitchen creating recipes. We have an amazing culinary team, but to sort of give them the vision and the feedback on the recipes. And it's such an amazing, extraordinary privilege to have the team that we have right now. And for me to sort of be there, support them in ways that I've been able to. It's a privilege. It's awesome.
And so you have a group of restaurants now. You could say that you own the restaurant group. Is that the correct
Yes.
jargon?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. And what are those 5 restaurants now, or 6 restaurants now?
So there are 5 right now, and 2 of them, same brand. It's called Speaks Clam Bar, and it's sort of this New York style clam bar. My husband's from Long Island originally, and he grew up going to the clam bars. So we were missing that type of food. So we wanted to open something like that. My husband is my business partner as well right now. And another one that we opened 3 years ago is called Kojo, and that is in Sarasota. And that is sort of this modern Asian, and nod to a lot of our travels all around the world. And then last year, right next door to Kojo, we opened Bar Hana by Kojo, which is this Kojo's tropical little sister. It's like a fun tropical bar with elevated bar food. And then last year, to sort of give the nod to the heritage Eastern European, and my husband growing up in a Jewish household, we created a New York style deli with just a lot of family recipes and really just a fun atmosphere. There's a jukebox. The interior is great. And we work with an amazing team of designers too that help us sort of take that vision and implement this.
I think at that level, it sounds like you're doing so many different things. What is you mentioned you have your culinary team, but I think, and I could be wrong here, but when you're operating business at that level, you must be fantastic at team building. What does your team look like now that manages building new restaurants, scaling new restaurant chains, managing current restaurants? What does that all look like?
It's a big team. So like I mentioned, my husband is my business partner. His background is in technology. So he actually was able to help us create software. So 3 years ago, when we opened Kojo, he actually created our own point of sale system. So that helps. And then having his business acumen. So he grew up in a family of entrepreneur and his dad. And so having him as my mentor for we're together 24 years. So for the last 24 years has been absolutely amazing. So together we were able to put together this team and we practice servant leadership. So we're there for them to just support them, and they're very independent. There's no micromanaging. So we have a director of operations and we have a culinary director. And so that's the core. And then we have human resources ahead of that. And then there's over 400 team members right now overall, but we have meetings with our director of operations and culinary director and executive chef once a week to just sort of go over all the operations. And then there's the beverage director and then managers at each location as well. So it's comprehensive, but because our leadership team is so strong and they are unbelievable communicators, which I think communication at this high level is key to success.
So you got an amazing team of 400 people. You're running this business, you and your husband and husband/business partner. How do you have time to fit speaking and going to speaking gigs and speaking on stages on top of all of that?
Well, it's the team, like I had mentioned. I was on the call with our director of operations just now, and this week we're doing a presentation for the New England Inns and Resorts Association because they had asked us to share in the conversation about employee wellness because it's such a overlooked topic, especially with wellness industry itself looking to become $1 trillion industry by 2025. So I feel that it is our responsibility to give back and contribute to these conversations as well. And I enjoy speaking with students at the university. I'm on the advisory board at the School of Hospitality here at USF. So 3 or 4 times per semester, I get invited to speak to the students, which is always such a way to invest in the next generation. And my dad was an educator. My dad was at a college for 35 years. So it's sort of fun for me and natural to talk to students because I basically grew up in the university in the hallways.
And for you, well, first of all, it's really cool that you can still find that and you see it as it's an interesting way to look at it, an investment in the next generation. I think. Mm-hmm. Well, before I ask the next question, I was going to ask what is it about speaking that lights you up? How do you feel on stage? What does that feel like for you?
Well, it's interesting because I like I mentioned, I grew up with this sort of mindset of being quieter than water and lower than grass. So, and I'm a huge introvert. So for me to be out around people, it's always not easy, challenging. There's just always 2 languages in my head, and I am always thinking about, am I awkward in different situations? Am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Because I think having the opportunity and privilege of having traveled around the world, I'm always aware of being very respectful to people's customs and the way that they interact. So to sort of have this mindset of being really connected to the audience and understand all the different viewpoints of the audience, that's so important for me to address. And I think that for us to be able to share the ideas and we might be just a few steps ahead of somebody else. So if something that I say on stage might inspire somebody to make a change in their life, that's a power and responsibility that I don't take lightly.
And as a restaurant, how do you say that word correctly? Is it restaurateur? Is it like a combination of entrepreneur and restaurant person? I'm not super familiar with restaurant business.
Yes, it is. I think you have the right way to look at this. It is definitely entrepreneurship, and it is, I guess, entrepreneurship in the restaurant industry.
Gotcha. Okay. So a lot has changed over the past 10 years in food and wellness especially. what's been the number one challenge you've had over these past 10 years in restaurant tour, if I say it right? How have you overcame that challenge?
Oh my gosh. I feel like we are having to adapt to something new almost daily. I know all of us have been hit by the pandemic. And even during that time, we just had to put on all of our creative hats and find ways to keep team members motivated and engaged and in the way that we communicated with them internally, and then being really supportive of them in the way that they communicated with themselves and with guests. So from that, I think the biggest challenge, that's something I think, just adapting to change. And I think that having gone through all the challenges that I've gone through in life and all the changes and all the moves, I've actually gotten pretty good to adapting to change. So while it's a challenge, I also look at this as a huge learning curve, because every day we just deal with so many different personalities, so many, from people and the growing teams to the guests and the guests' needs, and so just having to continually adapt to that and not get so much in my head with the ego, with judgment or self-criticism or anything like that. That's why mindfulness has become my go-to. Just like every day
Hmm.
I evaluate everything that I do and the way that the way, and not just what I do but how I do it through the lens of mindfulness. That's been my biggest, most helpful tool.
Hmm. And one thing I'm really curious about is, so I was at I guess you call it a business retreat or business mastermind in Tulum. And I guess
Mhm.
there I was talking to a lot of the guys there, and they were talking about how food is a data set. It's a set of
Mm.
commands that you tell your body to do. When you put in these molecules in these food, it makes your body do a certain thing. And it started getting me thinking about, how food works and how your body interprets the food and all that kind of stuff. So I'm super curious, how do you go about designing a menu at a new restaurant you have with wellness at the forefront of how that menu is designed? What does that kind of process look like?
Well, that's an interesting question, because the concepts that we have are very, very different. There's different menus. There's some stuff that's healthy, and there's some stuff that's healthy-ish, and there's some stuff that is just not. And then we try to design the menus with trying to find that balance between addressing the needs of the guests, right? So the biggest thing that I think that we approach differently in the way that we create the menus is treating guests that come in with different needs and different dietary restrictions as VIPs almost. Because in some restaurants, the guests that have a gluten intolerance or they have an allium allergy, in some places, and I myself can relate to that because I have some sensitivities and allergies. And there was a period for about a year of my life, I was very restricted in what I could eat. And there were a lot of experiments involved. And anyway, that's a long story, maybe for another time. But I think that having myself not having experienced that compassion from restaurants, and just kind of being like, how you just want like plain chicken breast with no seasoning, or you want nut-free pesto. Haven't experienced that. We have worked with our teams to be extra compassionate to those guests that come in and ask for more vegetarian or vegan options, or no soy or anything like that. So it's just that compassionate approach to the needs of our guests is a huge priority for us.
That's really cool. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense too, kind of coming from your own experience throughout your life.
Yeah.
What would you say are some of the more surprising or even most surprising trends in the restaurant industry, let's say, that you see kind of where the puck is going over the next 5-10 years?
Great question. So there's a lot. Every year we usually go to the National Restaurant Association show in Chicago. I skipped last year due to some personal reasons, but it's interesting to kind of see. So the latest trend that I just read about is lab-grown meat, which just feels strange to me because especially studying nutrition and understanding the humane practices of raising meat. Just the idea that would be grown in the lab was strange. I have tried different meat substitutes, and a lot of them have so many fillers that my body reacts to negatively. So I would just, oh, I guess all of these alternatives, I think that if they are put together in ways where there are no fillers and no preservatives, which is kind of, if I were to make a vegan burger, right, I would make it with all natural ingredients without all of the stabilizers, I should say. So yeah, lab grown meat, I think is the one that freaks me out the most. And then I'm hoping that with a lot of plant-based alternatives that they'll become more natural and just a little bit closer to the way that our bodies are meant to digest food. Otherwise it just becomes more of that, just more of the badly manufactured stuff.
That's interesting. Yeah, I know my perspective on it is still, I don't have a set perspective on it yet because I mean, I've seen it, but I haven't tried it yet. So I don't really know. And I guess I don't know myself well enough to know how my body would react to something like that. But that's interesting. That's a trend you see. You've led a lot of people over the past 2 decades. What would you say has been one of the most powerful lessons in what you'd call transformational leadership or management, which are two totally different things, but we'll use them under the same umbrella for the sake of the question? One lesson about those things that you've learned over the past, your entire entrepreneurial career, really.
I think the biggest lesson would be to become a great listener. Because when you lean in to the conversation, and instead of trying to push your own agenda and you set your ego aside, and then you learn to listen to people and communicate in such meaningful ways, that was my biggest lesson.
Interesting. And if you have a message for the person that has a story in them that they know they can impact someone, like in your case with, coming from your background, coming to the US, building this, this restaurant group and owning these restaurants and scaling them and all that kind of stuff. If you have a message to that person that was the you after culinary school, when you had that, the hip displacement, scoliosis, I think is what you said. If you have a message for that person that they know they have a story, they're just kind of scared they don't know how to move forward with it. Maybe paralysis by analysis, or they know they've got a story in them. They're just kind of stuck there. What do I do? There's so many things I could do. What do I do with this story and these people that I can serve?
There's definitely a lot of stories that I feel that people keep inside, which is okay. I think that sometimes keeping the stories private is also okay. But if there is this desire to share this story, I would say start with mentors. I've been really, really fortunate. My first speaking mentors were Michael and Amy Port with Heroic Public Speaking, because I knew that I had to, at some point, speak through my wellness business. And I wanted to have really good mentors who really understood, and they were both actors trained. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, with them and their programs. So that was my first introduction, and I went to multiple events. I think that learning how to speak in person is really, really powerful, to work with people in a very structured environment. So I've done training with them, and then I had another coach on all around TEDx. And then when I was getting ready to give my own TEDx talk, I had hired a coach that had helped me to shape my message. And she took me from what's my idea of what's spreading, which is the whole point of TED Talks, to the point she actually came and watched me give this talk and then supported me afterwards. And it wasn't an easy journey. I think that going into this and understanding that you have to face a lot of personal blocks. So I think to have somebody to gently guide you and navigate you through the labyrinth of the walls that we continually build in front of ourselves for safety. I think that would be the most impactful thing to do is to get help and get into a community of people who may be at the same place where you are, who are also terrified. So then you can kind of link your hands together and tell you, look, you are not alone in this. I've had the same fears, and maybe we can lift each other up and support each other through this journey of fear, and having somebody who is a few steps ahead, who's been on this journey, to sort of lean in their sage advice and wisdom and experience.
Right. And one thing I think that you would know that I maybe am not the most qualified to provide guidance on, which I'm super curious to kind of see if you could provide guidance on this message of help or assistance or guidance for the introvert that is speaking where to a crowd in English, but English is not their first language. What message do you have for that person?
So I'm a part of the mastermind right now, and the founder, she's a great speaker. Am I okay to share names?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, so Jen Gottlieb is one of her and her husband Chris. But she's a great speaker, and she does have a background she was on Broadway, and she's done a lot of time on stage, and she enjoys being on stage, even though she says that she's an introvert. So during our mastermind day, she came up to me and she said, Natalia, you will break all glass ceilings for women who are in the hospitality industry. And I think that having somebody who is many steps ahead of you to give you that consistent encouragement is so powerful. And another exercise that we do with Jen is really cool. It's kind of you 2.0, right? So can you step into yourself, into that version of yourself, without limitations, without fears, without anything holding you back? What would that look like for you? Right? And there's this meditation where you sort of step into that. And then what is really there between you, who you are now, and that version of you? So it's like, how do we bridge that gap? And it's just mindset, right? So I think that many of us, and I know for me, that was such a powerful exercise to actually, even if it's in my vision, right, to step into that me 2.0, the version of me that I never even thought that was possible, and then have that, and then materialize that, like make that person a reality, and then start acting like that person. So what does that version 2.0 version of me looks like? What does she feel like? What does she behave like? What does she say? And then you kind of start bridging that gap a little bit by little. And then there's you 3.0, and however points there are in a lifetime. But that was extremely, extremely powerful for me personally, and really helpful.
And if I can ask, if you're open to sharing, is a better question. What does your you 2.0 look like right now?
It's I think it's just that continuous work, just having more, probably bigger audience, and the audience that is, I think for me it's more about creating legacy work right now. So I am so fortunate to just continue working with students. I don't have big aspirations right now at this moment right now. I think because this year we're opening this big project, this big food hall, that and last year I had two very, very personal losses in my life, that this is the year that I'm kind of being still very gentle on myself and just dealing with grief and just collecting myself. So for me, 2.0 right now in this point of my life is just working on healing.
Powerful. And in the future, where do you plan on taking your speaking career, or if you can call it a career? I know your business and speaking are very linked, right? What do you plan on doing with that in the future? And then if you have any message for that to wrap it up with.
It's interesting. I think that before, the question is, well, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? It was so relevant, right? Because I feel like things in life are moving at a pretty steady pace, and there was a lot of predictability. Where in doing a lot of spiritual work in the last decade, I have learned to not make a lot of plans ahead. And I think especially in the last year, all the changes that we're seeing with AI, and who knows what's going to happen with virtual reality, as there's going to be more virtual stages, that we're going to be all holograms, speaking of different stages, right? So my answer would be, I don't know what to expect. I think that if the opportunities come, I would welcome them. And I have, in the next 2 weeks, I have two very large speaking opportunities coming up. And do I have a dream? Not yet. It hasn't formed. So what I do is I guess I sort of ask the universe or whoever is out there for guidance and give me clear signs, and it has not steered me wrong so far. So I think that having sort of this, I saw Gabby Bernstein speak recently, and she was talking about being untethered. And I think that there's such a powerful message in going into something without being completely attached to the outcome, because sometimes we limit our dreams and we can limit what the outcome can be. So I think that having this sort of untetherness, I don't know if that's a word. Is that a word, untetherness? To the expectation, it is very freeing. So there are goals and milestones, right? But I think that the overall is like, I don't want to limit what's possible. So instead, my approach is, I would welcome what's right for me to find me.
Love it. And then here's this question, which I am very personally curious about. When you gave your TEDx talk, what year was it?
Oh, good question. I think 2019, if I'm not mistaken. Let's look at this horse. 2019, yes.
Okay. So you were pretty, like, you had a pretty big team in your business at that point.
Well, that was in the early stages of our business.
Okay.
And that talk was really more, it was the surprising connection between gut and happiness, was the TED Talk. So that was still me really working very heavily with my nutritional courses that I was creating at a time. So I think that my message would be drastically different right now if I were to go and give another TED Talk.
Sure. And what message do you have for the business owner or business leader that is thinking about giving a TEDx talk but just doesn't see the ROI in it? Is it, well, there's none, there's a little bit, this is how I leveraged it? what would you say to that person that's kind of having that internal debate?
Well, there's a big difference between TED and TEDx, right? And TED has such phenomenal reputation just as a TED stage. It's one of the most prestigious stages to be invited to speak at. And then the TEDx are individually organized and independently organized events. I think that being involved, so if somebody were to start, I would see if there's a TEDx organized in your area. And then I would start by volunteering for the event to see in whatever way, whether it's contributing maybe to a speaker dinner the night before or speaker training, just some sort of, I think any position that you have the time for to do, I would start with volunteering so that you can understand if it's right for you, because it may or may not be. The talks are approved before they're posted. There's definitely a lot of strategy to how get the ROI from this talk. It's not well, I'm going to give a TED talk, a TEDx talk, and then, you can't just give one of those talks and not do anything about it. There's definitely a strategy before and afterwards on how to promote it and how to get the ROI from it. So that is something. So if you have somebody that you work with, I work with a coach that has guided me through all of that stuff. So I think that it's very individual, whether it's right for you, if it's right for business. You might be just really passionate about a topic and you feel that more people need to hear about this. And that's fine too.
One interesting thing you said that I'm super curious about, you said you would have a different message today than you had at that point. I think that's totally normal as we all evolve over time individually. Mm-hmm. If you were to, let's say tomorrow, give a TEDx talk, or even the more prestigious TED Talk, there's one a year in Vancouver, what would you speak on if you were to be thrown on the TED stage tomorrow?
Well, I am giving a talk in a couple of weeks, and it's a long one. It's a keynote style talk, and it is on leaning into adaptability as a superpower. So that would be my message.
Cool, really cool. Well, do you have any last message that you would want aspiring speakers, professional speakers, business owners who speak for their business, TEDx speakers, any last message before we wrap it up here?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. You are a great interviewer. So I hope that you have wonderful channels that give a lot of information to your guests. I think that they'll learn a lot and take away what they need to take away. Because everybody hears what they need to hear at the time that they need to hear this. And my message would be to, if you feel that you have a story in you, I would start. This is really good advice that I was given. Start collecting voice memos right in your phone. Start speaking into your phone, or you have the camera and start videotaping yourself speaking. Just, you don't even have to do this whole big setup or anything like that, but you yourself need to get comfortable with your body language, with all the little things. And then another thing that I have done before I actually gave my TEDx talk is I went on a masterclass and I was watching a class by Natalie Portman. And she's an actress, very famous actress. So her masterclass was really phenomenal. But I think the voice memos, videotaping yourself, even if you can get like a little tripod, and it feels really, really awkward. When you first doing it, you just going to be like, oh my gosh, this is horrendous. I look back at a lot of my stuff. I listen to a lot of my voice memos. You just feel like such a failure. But the more consistently you do it for yourself, and nobody has to ever see it or hear it or anything like that. Do it for yourself. But it'll be interesting to look back, as you're further down in this journey, and to look back and compare your beginnings. That's great. Like, for example, right now I enrolled myself into community college, and I'm just happened this semester I'm taking a public speaking class. So I think that just going back to the humble beginnings is really cool, and like revisit all the first lessons is always helpful, no matter what stage you're at.
Well, Natalia, thank you very much. I'll wrap it up here, and thank you all for
Thanks,
listening.
Ryan.
Cheers, y'all.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to Speaking to Expand. Until next week, keep speaking and keep expanding.